is considered one of the country's most significant archaeological discoveries. Archaeologists are unveiling what's been found from the 6 sacrificial pits discovered between 2019 and 2020. Later on the show, we'll go to a live signal from the Mandarin channel of China Media Group, where our Mandarin-speaking colleagues will be broadcasting live with details from Sanxingdui. We'll be translating simultaneously for you. And now, what do we know? Archaeologists are still excavating 6 sacrificial pits at Sanxingdui. A number of gold foil pieces have been extracted from pit number 5, including one that's in the shape of a bird. Experts say the delicate piece could have been used as a decoration on ancient wares. They have also found the remains of elephant tusks and ivory artifacts, which were probably burned. This latest dig has discovered more than 500 new relics, including gold and bronze statues, masks, as well as jade and pottery. For the very latest from Sanxingdui, as always, let's first check in with CGTN's Ji Xiaojun in Guanghan, Sichuan province, where the Sanxingdui ruins are located. Xiaojun, the excavation process will continue long after our special coverage concludes. We've only been able to show our viewers a fraction of the painstaking efforts by those archaeologists. What are we focusing on today?
Well, indeed, it's going to be a long process. The excavation could last for months, if not more than that. Today, our focus will be on a few things. First, they're going to try to take out some more artifacts from the pits, including an oval-shaped jade from pit number 5, and also the golden band we mentioned earlier, and they're also going to try to take that out again today. It was planned for yesterday, but it didn't happen. Obviously, they needed more time for preparation of that. And at the same time, with pit number 8, they've already found 8 stone daggers and 1 bronze dagger, together with a pottery bowl. And they continue to find more evidences of what looked like the construction remains, including slab stones or burnt soil, and also what was suspected as one section of heavily carbonized roof beam. And also, at the same time, and they're also doing all kinds of testing, scanning, and to make sure no historical information was to be missed. And if you go back to the roof beam, it's 12 centimeters wide and 40 centimeters above the ground, and the rest of it is still buried underground. Now, they believe with pit number 3, they believe there will be, there is actually a bronze tree. The pattern of it, it's designed in a way very similar to the one that we found earlier, the large sacred bronze tree. It's 3.96 meters high, and if that is the case, then it probably will prove the point shared by many experts that the Sanxingdui culture is indeed a locally cultivated culture, which coincides with the ancient Chinese mythology and philosophy. And at the same time, also with pit number 3, the bronze mosque, which is still half buried, and they believe this is very likely to be the largest bronze mosque ever discovered at the sacrificial pits. Meanwhile, researchers are also busy analyzing the content of the ash layers, and so far they've already found traces of bamboo, grass, grain, other than the silk traces they've tested positive earlier. Now, testing is also ongoing with the wooden box in pit number 6. They're now testing leftover elements of starch or animal fat, and even ester, with the last one being tested for any signs, any possible signs of alcohol originally in the wooden box.
Interesting discoveries there, Xiaojun. I look forward to checking in back with you later on our program, but thank you so much as always. I have a great panel today. Watching this with me here in the studio, we have Dr. Fan Jialing, Deputy Director of the Center for Museum Development and Research in Capital Normal University. Wang Xianhua is joining us from Shanghai. He is the Dean of the Institute for the Global History of Civilizations in Shanghai International Studies University. Great to have both of you on our program today. Mr. Wang, I want to start with you. let's spend some time talking about those fibrins that were found. These are insoluble proteins present in silk. I find it very exciting. What did you make of this discovery, and what might it tell us?
Thank you. We just mentioned the wooden box from pit 6. And in fact, this is one of the findings I'm most curious about. Technically, there is no fibrin reported from the wooden box yet. But it's certain that silk products were buried in some of the sacrificial pits, such as pit 4, for instance. And the other day in another interview, I said otherwise because I was too excited that the finding of the fabric remains would have proven the existence of some kind of silk industry as long as this time at Sanxingdui. But today, perhaps I need to be a bit more refrained in saying so, because we apparently need further evidence to prove the existence of such kind of silk industry. But one thing is already clear, because from here, as long as we find hard evidence for the existence of, for the use of silk products at Sanxingdui, we already have a point to start with, to rethink about Chengdu as an international hub as early as the Sanxingdui period, connecting other parts of China and other parts of the world, in fact. And this finding is definitely a new piece of history. However small it is, at least it will be quite a few very interesting small stories. Thank you.
Dr. Fan, it has been exhilarating watching the digging and extracting of these artifacts from the ground. I do want to ask you this, what happens next? Because now we have hundreds of artifacts, including gold pieces and elephant tusks, that have been unearthed. Share with us how archaeologists will restore and preserve these artifacts next.
The archaeologists are still working on site, and there will be more and more different kinds of different materials of evidences dug out from the pit. And you have already noticed that there are many other experts from different disciplines. They are also on site, and there are conservators, experts in conservation. So because this time's excavation is well planned, supported by State Administration of Cultural Heritage and all different kinds of universities and institutes, all from China, and they bring their high techs and their skills and their technologies to support the archaeologists to do further excavation and conservation. And talk about conservation in China. Actually, we have the conservation in China have developed for decades also, and since 2005, the State Administration of Cultural Heritage have set it up many key research base for conservation and study of cultural heritage with a close collaboration with different universities and institutes. For example, the conservation of wooden objects, the research base of conservation of wooden objects is in the Hubei Provincial Museum. Something like that. So I think all the experts and conservators in China will support the Sanxingdui site to do the further conservation and the excavation. And also because we have developed for many years and we are very open-minded. We open our research and conservation not only to all the Chinese scholars, but also to the international academia. So I think in the future we will do the conservation and do the research with the whole world, because Sanxingdui is not only the treasure of Chinese people, but also one of the greatest excavation discoveries for the whole world.
Dr. Fan, it just hit me while you were talking just now, because this has been a long process in working. We've only been able to show the middle part of the process, because first you have the surveying of the terrain, and then archaeologists move to the digging and excavating, which is the part we're now showing to our viewers. After that, we're, as you mentioned, it's going to be the restoration, preserving, and next, the presenting of the artifacts to visitors both from China and the world. Now, if we look at the process in its entirety, what part seems to be the most challenging?
I think the whole work is very challenging, to be honest. But because different kinds of material of the objects cause different problems. If I have to say one specific object that needs much more attention, which is ivory. Because in Sanxingdui pit number 1 and pit number 2, and also in these days other pits, there are many elephant tusks. And because the special material of the elephant tusk, it is very difficult to conserve this kind of material. Because it is a kind of a combination of organic material and also inorganic material. So it's very hard to conserve elephant tusks, especially when they were buried in a very humid or water environment. Yeah.
Well, that certainly is new information to me because, the way I understand is because we've had quite a number of those tusks. They're not probably as rare. I didn't realize that the restoration and preserving of elephant tusks could be so challenging. Mr. Wong, I got a question for you. When you look at these new finds as well as previous discoveries, how would you characterize the Sanxingdui culture?
Categorizing an archaeological culture such as Sanxingdui as a synthesis, I would say it should be a task for qualified specialists, and we will need quite a big book for it, or books. But I understand what we are talking about is a general understanding of Sanxingdui culture as a full-flowing original tradition on the Chengdu Plain more than 3,000 years ago. In this sense, and based on my limited knowledge of Sanxingdui, I would say in the most general terms, the most striking characteristic of Sanxingdui culture for me was its creativity in combination with its cultural openness. On different levels, from the elite to the ordinary, as so far known, we know relatively little of their daily life, though. It is clear that Sanxingdui shared the material culture with all different directions. But clearly, on the highest elite level, it was already part of the, let's say, the Chinese civilization or the civilizational world of China. It has its own highly idiosyncratic and sophisticated style, which is a richness that was an embodiment, let's say, of its only embodiment only possibly of a kind of openness. We see, I would characterize Sanxingdui in this way. This is the reason. Creativity in combination with its cultural openness. Thank you.
Dr. Fan, I know you will want to come in here because you have a very strict and narrow definition when it comes to culture. What part about the Sanxingdui culture that we know so far that makes it valid as a local culture back in ancient days, and what elements of the culture impress you the most?
I think because archaeology is a scientific discipline that all based on solid material evidence, so we can only make conclusions with solid information. For Sanxingdui culture, I think there are already many excavations and archaeological discoveries that can support us to understand that this was the center or the heart of the regional culture during that time. But I think the most amazing part is it is not only a regional heart, it is also nourished from all the surrounding areas. Get information, get techniques, get materials from all other surrounding areas, not only the Central Plain, but also the middle and lower Yangtze region. And finally, I think the Sanxingdui culture was absorbed into the so-called Chinese civilization later on. So I think that's the most amazing part, that when we discovered the Sanxingdui site at the beginning, and for all the research that we have known today.
Mr. Wong, can you take the opportunity to summarize for us what constitutes the Sanxingdui culture now? You talked about the creativity of the people back then. I suppose you were talking about people in the ancient Shu kingdom. With all of these artifacts discovered and unearthed so far, what aspects of the culture do we know? What aspects do we not? And what do you think the new finds this time will lead us to find out?
It's quite difficult to predict what we can possibly know based on what is already excavated. And as experts would know it better, some aspects of Sanxingdui site we know we accumulated quite a substantial amount of knowledge in the last decades, such as a particular ritual objects, such as including some parts of the architecture, the city walls, and in fact, scholars are slowly coming to terms with
Mr. Wong,
Sanxingdui.
Let me interrupt you over there. We're going to take our viewers straight to Sanxingdui to take a look at what is being done in some of the pits there.
大家现在看到的就是
Now
三星
what
堆
we
考
are
古发掘大
watching
棚
is the excavation shed for the Sanxingdui ruins. Inside we can find 4 excavation
三星
cabins.
堆神秘梦幻光辉璀璨
Sanxingdui ruins
又有
are
着
really
种种的谜团
mysterious,
跟随我
and
们的镜头
behind
到
that
考古
culture
发掘
so
的现
many
场
secrets
揭开
are
笼
waiting
罩在
to
三
be
星堆的
discovered
上
and
面上
revealed.
看
And
到一个
together with
更
us,
清晰的
we're about
现
to have a new discovery
那首
trip
先我们来
inside
到了
this
8
shed.
号坑所在
First
的
of
发
all,
掘
we
层
have come to the pit number 8.
我们先请蔡队来给我们介绍
I'd
一下
like
8号
to
坑应该是我
ask a
们发现
question
的
to
新发现的
Mr.
6
Tsai.
坑当中最大的一个坑了哈
The
现
pit
在的发掘
number
进展
8 is the largest in
那么
size
8号
among
坑
the
呢，现
6
在来
new
说，应该是我
pits.
们三星堆
Could you
本次
please
发
talk
掘
about the
中
latest
面积最大的一
development?
座坑
Yes, it's
它
the
的坑口呢
largest
长是5.1
in
米
terms of
宽
the
是3.8米，它的面积呢
size.
大概
It has
是
the
19
total
平方米
length
左
of
右。
5.1 meters and the width of 3.8 meters. The total area covered by the pit head is about 19 square meters. It's about 5 times the size of the pit 5. The excavation has started since last December, and until now, by the 18th, we have basically removed all the backfill and we have exposed the layer of the artifact. This is a very
这
big
个是我们发现的一共3块
a style of the stone. Yes, we have discovered 3 of them, and you can see that it has a very smooth surface.
这个圆圈是什么？是
What about that circle?
上面一些痕迹，
原来有的
Is
痕
it
迹
a trace left by you or it's original? It's original.
底面应该也是。
And on the bottom, it must also be very smooth.
这个什么的地面，
可能
院落的地面。
It looks like the flagstone used to make up the pavement.
这个年代很早。
But this one should be really old one, used by our ancestors.
不是你们什么的吧？
不是，这个是当时
你
形成的。
看这个也很可能是。
This is also originally formed.
拼接榫卯结
For
合
example, the conjuncture of the
这几天
two
咱们直
architectural
播当中一直在
parts.
提这个灰烬层
In
啊
these
我
days,
看
we
到
have
的
been
这些
talking a
它
lot
是怎么
about the
形成的
ash
在里面
layer.
含着什么
How does it
是这样的，灰烬层是我们
come into formation?
很有意思的现象。像
Yes,
8号
this
坑这个
ash
上
layer
层
is
是
very
一个
interesting thing
这个
about
黄
this
褐色
time's
的一个岩土
excavation. For
那么
example,
这个
you
岩
can
土之
see
下
that
就是这样
brown
一个灰
color
烬层
of the
包含大量的
clay,
碳
and
屑
under
包括
that
烧
layer of
渣呀
clay, you
黄
can
土碎
find
片
a lot
还有
of
一些
the
这个
ashes.
小件
That
的
is
这
the
个
ash
土
layer,
渣
where you
包括
can
玉石屑
find
的
also the
这个
mixture
可
of the
能是
remains
当时
of the
三个人
copper
在
and
祭祀
also
的
the
时候
gold
把一些祭祀
foil
用
of
品放到坑
charcoal
里之后
bones and
再
soil,
将这个
etc.
火烧过的
We
这些
believe that in
灰
the
烬
past,
再
in
到
old
坑里
days,
层
people, after finishing their ceremonies of the sacrifices, they poured everything, the bronzeware and also the ashes inside.
应该不是
So
在坑内的。
they
研究
are
这个灰烬层的意义是
poured inside the pit by the people, but they did the burning outside the
内
pit.
烧
Today, we still have to further our studies about the places of the burning. Where did that burning take place? Whether it's for sure it's taken place outside the pit, then in that case it's for the sake of our sacrifices ceremonies. And we also have a lot of detectors. For example, the detector for the metal, we can also use it. Yes, we have received very strong signals from the mid part of this pit. This means that they may be coming from those metal existence. Currently, we have only unearthed some smaller size of the jade ware and also the bronze. But this one is very interesting. It's the stone-made Dagger X. In total, we have unearthed 9 pieces of it, but this is the bigger one with a length of 40 centimeters and a width of 10 centimeters. But this is not a weapon. It's actually used for the sacrificial ceremonies. Yes, we can trace back to the origin of the Xia dynasty. By then, people were not using this Dagger Access as the weapon. Instead, it's used for the ceremonial function. And we have also noticed there's a very small bead made of the jade, and it's also pierced. So you can imagine our ancestors have used the wire to go through it and make it a decoration. And also we have discovered a lot of other pieces like the ivory artifact called the zhang, and also other stone dagger axes. They are all used for the ceremonial goals. For example, previously in the ruins of the Arditou, we have unearthed similar shapes and forms of artifacts. This can help us to better understand the ancient Shu culture and also the culture dating back to the Shang dynasty. And also we have unearthed similar objects in Vietnam. Yes, because these objects in the old days have been spread to the neighboring areas. For example, in Dagang site, we have unearthed the very small size of it, and also a bigger one with a total length of more than 1 meter in Vietnam. So I believe that this is a kind of a symbol for the spreading culture from the Central Plain culture. That kingdom of a Central Plain culture has a very wide influence on the neighboring cultures. And we know that Sanxingdui ruins are located in the plain of Chengdu in the Sichuan province. So between those two regions, for the Central Plain and also the Chengdu Plain, there must be a trajectory for the commercial exchanges in order to let the cultural objects flow. And inside the pit, we have also noticed some red signals. It's a portable X-ray detector, so we can use it to run the test on site. This is the colored disc. For example, in the past, we have discovered some discs made of jade, and here most of the discs are made of bronze in Sanxingdui ruins. Yes, in the past days, we have also noticed some remains of a colored bronze discs. And here, we have bigger numbers of the discs here, and it's quite difficult to keep them in such an intact way because today, after years of burial, they have become really fragile. And over there, we can also notice some pottery as well as the layer of the burnt soil. For the burnt soil, they are actually the soil burned by our ancestors. Several explanations for that. First explanation is the cooking pit. And the second possibility is for the reason of the humidity prevention. We need to burn the soil before putting them into the facades of our housings. And the third explanation, it could be for the construction decoration. This is a very unique feature for the pit 8 because you can find a tilting tendency inside this pit, and this direction would give us a lot of information and details about the pit. Maybe after burning down the whole structure of the architecture, people poured everything remaining inside this pit. That's why we can find the big blocks of stones and mud and soil as well as the beings inside. That's why we can find some long wood. So maybe it could be considered as the ruins or relics of a sacred temple. Yes, we can admit that kind of possibility. So this kind of relics from architecture has never been discovered before in Sanxingdui ruins. Yes, exactly. We have been considering this as the sacrificial pit, and until now we have not yet discovered any ivory objects from the pit 8. And so for the pit 7, we have not yet completed the cleaning work. For the pit 1, 2, and 4, we have a great number of the elephant tusks. And for the pit 5, no ivory but a lot of gold. And for the 6, no existence of the ivory but a very big wooden box. Inside, we can see a very thick layer of the stone and also some remains of a copper containers. And by the corner, there are 2 cracked bronze bells. Talking about the bronze bells, the earliest ones have been unearthed in Shanxi province. And later on in the Shang dynasty, also some objects similar to the bronze bells. So you can hang it.
And actually a lot of these pieces are related to the construction materials. I believe these are the basics for the architecture, and also we have the Dagger X, and for these kind of pieces maybe they're the ritual objects. So even though we do not find any elephant tusk here, but still we could see some of the construction materials. We have to look into the objects into this pit, because we do see a lot of the Jade stone and the Dagger Access. It's quite interesting. All of these belong to the ritual vessels. Probably it will associate it with the temple and also the sacrificial activities. And what about this one? I believe this is also a piece of bronze. We started to see the complete view of the pit number 8. We are looking forward to see some new discoveries. Now we move back to pit number 4. And for pit number 4, yesterday we found a long shape of ceramics. We have to remove some of the pieces of the potteries, and then we are able to see some of the other objects. Now they are cleaning up some of the earth. You could see some of our archaeologists. They are lying on the platform to clean the ash layers. And I believe this is a foundation of the ceramics. So first, our archaeologists have to remove all of the earth, and then we're able to extract all of those relics. We don't want to damage other relics buried underground. We have to be very careful. We shall not damage the bronze piece, and we should not damage other pieces of relics. And also for the bottom of the ceramics, we have to pay attention to the remains of the silk and fabrics. And also we want to look inside of these areas to see if we have some other elements, because for the potteries, basically they will contain other things. So we are not sure whether it contains liquid or plants or other materials. So what about this one? This is like a plastic tool. I think it's a specially made soil collector. So is it possible that we could see what kind of objects can be lifted from this pit? So during your live coverage, I believe today we are able to remove the foundation of the ceramics. Is it difficult to lift this object? As far as I see, I think it's quite difficult to lift these relics. We are quite looking forward to see some of the new discoveries, especially the gold foil. But still, we need to be very careful about the collection. So, Mr. Wong, I believe ancient people pay a lot of attention to potteries. It's a great invention. Back in the old days, actually 10,000 years to 13,000 years earlier, we are able to create potteries. In the Shangshan relics of Zhejiang province, we are able to find some potteries. And also we see some traces of the paddy rice. According to my understanding, in the old days, people depend on hunting for food, and sometimes they will do barbecue. Maybe they don't need to use containers. However, with the change of the environment, there may be more plants, and many people would like to feed themselves with the plants. So some of this food need to be cooked. For example, you may collect some nuts. You have to boil some of the food. That comes to the invention of the potteries. And actually, China is the earliest place in Asia to Eastern Asia to invent this kind of potteries. So I believe people will put some pastries on top of the plates, and then they could make pancakes. So at the beginning we have potteries, and later we started to make ceramics and bronzewares. We always talk about ceramics and potteries. However, actually it dated back to different stage, different periods. And if we're able to invent one of the pottery, and then we will actually put 3 stones to support the pottery. Then we invented the cooking vessel with 3 legs. And later on, we will also use a pottery oven. So we are also creating the piece, what we call ding, is also a kind of cooking vessel. And also we have li, a cooking tripod with hollow legs. So as you know, in Sanxingdui, the cooking vessel with 3 legs is also very famous. In ancient Shu Kingdom, it's also very typical and representative in the Sanxingdui culture. So now the excavation work is still going on. And actually yesterday we found an extraction of the oval-shaped jade. Let's see what happened there. Right now the excavation work is still going on. Previously we called this like an eye-shaped jade piece. Yes, indeed, it has a very large eyes, and also we have the gold foils covering this piece. I think it is in an oval shape. I think this is quite intact. I believe this piece was not burnt in the past. And also the jade is of good quality. I'm not sure what is the other side. Maybe it is also very smooth on the surface. Now we're at the P number 5. Even though there were some elephant tusks here, but we do not see any intact pieces. We have some broken pieces of the tusk. Mr. Tai, when we are lifting the jade ware, what are some of the challenges? So first we have to pay attention to the surface. For some of the jade ware, they are not preserved very well. It is quite fragile on the surface. And also we need to understand the composition and what are the objects inside of the jade ware. So for example, in the past when we are trying to lift the Cong, another kind of jade piece, there may be some cracks. we have to be
至于这个
careful.
东西呢，它是用在什么上边？我们也比如看有没有
So when we are
是
trying
镶嵌
to
的地
collect
方
this
啊
kind
还
of
是
jade ware, we
是
have
它
to pay
本身
attention
就
to
是
the
一个把玩
details to see whether this piece of jade ware is a decoration or an
上面
ornament.
的撬动它，
We're trying to see
感
whether
觉
there
下面
was
应该是
some
个椭圆，
orifice or holes inside of the jade ware. I believe this one also have a base.
好，应该
可以了
已经到最后一步了
对对。
嗯，
Now we are coming to the last stage for the extraction.
有点扁平的感
扁
觉。
平扁平。
一会儿我们就能看
It's
见后
quite
面是什
flat
么样的。
on the surface. Soon we will see what it looks on the opposite side of this jade piece.
拿了一个更大的，哦，一层一层的，
对这样把它
哦，
So we have to remove some of the remains by
这个
different
撬动的缝
layers.
隙不断变大，然后呢，提
应该是
取的这个塑料也会变大，把它挪上来，
We need to have
沾着很多土。
well-designed tool
好。
to
回到实验室
remove
就看它
the
有没有
jade
浮动
piece.
啊，感觉下面是
Alright
扁平的啊，
对，
这已经提取成
We
功
are
了。
able to extract this jade ware.
放在保护盒当中。
We have to put it into a preservation box.
这个预制还真相当好。
I can tell the quality is very good.
好，交给坑边上的，
And then they will hand it over to another archaeologist.
两只手小
小
心翼翼
心翼翼
地捧过来。
是是是，
They're very careful.
这是都有操作规范的，你不能
We
一个
do
手
have
对，我
some
们正好看一下。
procedures of standards.
出同
And then we have to take a photo of this jade piece. Later we will generate a QR code for this
是
piece.
那个10公分10厘米的
10厘米
This-
直径
The
有
length
8
is 10 centimeters
还挺大的。
with
对。
8 centimeters in the
但是它确实
diameter.
是它干什么
It's
用
quite
的？
large.
就是
没有孔。
So what is the
就是
function
接
of
下来
that?
就要来
Because we do not see any holes inside of this
看它
piece.
是不是完全的扁平。
So we have to further analyze it
对
later.
这可能里还有
还有比这个大吗？
So maybe we could also expect to see some similar jade artifacts in this same pit, maybe with the same size or from a different position of this pit.
有人说是一个大厂啊，说那是不是有可能镶嵌在什么上？
衣服上。
And we may also have a guess that all these pieces of the jade belong to the same settings of ornament. And we have also coded.
这个玉器文化也是我们中华文明
The
特别特殊的一
culture
个
of jade is a very important cultural element of the Chinese civilization. In the Chinese character system, we have more than 500 Chinese characters with a part signifying the jade. And dating back to the ancient days, about 9,000 years, we have already started to make the jade ornament, and also we have unearthed the jade objects dating back to 8,000 years ago and later 7,000 years ago. So we do have this very splendid culture of the jade. After extracting this piece of jade from the pit, we have unveiled that layer beneath it. It should be a piece of the bone. And now we have to further our studies on that. And now we are collecting some soil samples from the pit. For this moment, we are not sure what is lying beneath. It looks like a thicker piece of ivory. I believe it's not ivory because it's already fragmented, so it's not a elephant tusk. And we also have to further study if there's any motif on the surface of it. If it's heavily fragmented, then we have to ask for help from the laboratory workers. Our archaeologists are still working very hard in the pit. They are continuing with this collection and cleaning work.
发掘进展。
And we will continue to give you the updates.
Delicate work there indeed. And let's head over to another pit where archaeologists have extracted a 3,000-year-old bronze zun from pit number 3, which is the largest bronzeware discovered in the ongoing excavations. Let's get some live pictures.
好的，老陈燕。
Wow, Chen Yan. Now what you can see is a very huge bronze vessel collected from the pit 3 and now already transferred to the institute. You can see that there's a layer of attached soil and we are moving away this layer and we are revealing the motifs on the surface of the bronze. We have to be really careful because after thousands of years of burial, this whole vessel becomes very fragile and weak. That's why we have to give a lot of attention to that. It has a total height of 70 centimeters. It's the biggest bronze ever discovered from the Sanxingdui ruins. That's why we have to give a lot of attention and studies to that. So after cleaning away all that mud, what will you do the next? After cleaning away the soil, we have to use the CT to run the scanning to see if there is any content inside. If there's something inserted inside, then we have to be extremely careful. If there's no content inside, then we can be more brave in the cleaning work in the following step. For the vessels collected from the pit 1 and pit 2, we have noticed that there are some shells buried inside, inserted inside the belly. So nowadays we have to continue with this CT scanning with this vessel, and we will also run an analysis on the soil collected from the surface, and we are also wondering why it is lying down instead of standing up, because this object has been buried for thousands of years. And when it's in the soil, it has been under pressure and influence of the surrounding environment. Now we have taken it out of the pit. We have to maintain such a position. And after cleaning away all the soil, then we can start the restoration work about it. What about the status of its maintenance? Because it has been deformed and cracked during the thousands of years of burial. So today we have to do something for it. Due to the deformation and the cracks, we have to set up the model in order to complete the whole body of it. And we can also insert some new pieces of bronze to complete it. Yes, Mr. Guo, you are very experienced in the restoration for the bronzewares. For example, you have helped to successfully restore many bronzewares coming out from the pit 1 and 2. And usually, how long does it take for the restoration of such a bronzeware? And then we can see it. Talking about this big mouth bronzeware, the first step is to clean away the mud on the surface of it. And we also have to take some samples of the mud, and later we have to run the CT scanning and also have the readjustment about the whole body if there is the problem of the deformation. After figuring out all those issues, thanks to our science and technology, we have to take another 6 months for the restoration. Okay. And we can also notice that those big vessels collected previously from pit 1 and 2, they are still under restoration. After the molding and further completion work, we have to restore the original color of those vessels. It's also true with this time's big vessel in bronze, and finally it can meet the public. At the same time, during this process of cleaning mud, we have to pay attention to the motives. Our experts will also hurry to this institute. I've noticed that our expert Su is also present with us today. So what is the current feature about motif? In general, we can see that it's a very big scale, southern style, big mouth bronze vessel. Compared to the previously discovered bronzewares discovered in pit 1 and 2, they are similar in style and also in the making techniques. However, this one has its own unique features. For example, the decoration of it. At the shoulder part, you can see there are more protruding motifs and also 3 pieces of sculptures of the birds on the surface of it. In the past, it's more like 2D images of the birds that we can find on the surface of the bronzewares, but this time it's more like 3D sculptures. And thirdly, for the head of the animals, it's also very well decorated, and it can help us to understand that it's being separately cast. You have mentioned the technique of the manufacturing about it. Could you please talk more about the casting technique? Yes, I can use several keywords. First of all, you can see its belly and also the feet. It's the animal motif plus other types of motifs. And this sculpture, this protruding motif sculpture, is different from the previous ones. It's more 3D-like. It's more lifelike. And we can also find some concave to the other side of it. So that corresponds to the consolidation of the metal. That is the number 1. And the second point, so we have already mentioned the separate casting.
And this technique is more solid. It is also quite representative in the casting technique, and also we are talking about the use of the laying plate. We used to put some of the color so that we can show all of those motifs and patterns. So we all know the bronzeware representing the civilization in ancient times. So what is the differences for the bronzeware from ancient Shu Kingdom as compared to other places in China? Any similarities and differences? For the bronzeware from Sanxingdui, it carries enriched connotations. It has unique characteristics of the local region. And also, these bronze have a unique feature of Shang Dynasty and what we say the southern style. Because in Hunan, Hubei, and Anhui province, we also see similar type of bronzeware with the same features. They're also using similar techniques for the casting. According to our research, we believe this was produced in the Anhui and Jiangxi and also in the Sanxingdui area, and all of these actually unearthed from Sanxingdui. And for the style of these bronzeware, it actually shows a unique feature of Sanxingdui site. This also shows the charm of Sanxingdui civilization, because it actually carries the civilization of the Changjiang River region. Thank you very much for your introduction. As we all see, for one bronzeware, it can unveil a lot of mysteries, and we hope the excavation work can uncover more mysteries. Thank you very much. Back to the studio.
From pottery to jade to bronze, to help us make sense of it all, I have here in the studio Dr. Fan Jialing, Deputy Director of Center for Museum Development and Research in Capital Normal University, and Wang Xianhua, the Dean of Institute for the Global History of Civilizations in Shanghai International Studies University. Dr. Fan, let me start with you. I know exactly why I loved that zun or a bronze vessel. It's huge. Now tell me more about what I should know and love about it.
I think everybody, just like you, are amazed by the size and the detailed decorations on that big zun. But the more, just as the expert have said, indicated in the video, that Zun and Lei are the two most outstanding bronze vessels that were excavated in the 1986 for the excavation of pit number 1 and pit number 2. And for this time's excavation, we also already have excavated several bronze Zun. So that shows, because Zun was one of the typical bronze vessel in the Central Plain. So that indicates a communication or the borrow from the bronze vessels, the style or the types of bronze vessels from the Central Plain for the Sanxingdui culture. And also, just like the experts have indicated just now, that we could say there was a bronze road along the Yangtze River, and also between the culture, also between the Sanxingdui culture or the Chengdu Plain to the Central Plain during that time, according to the style, according to the shape of the bronze vessel of Zun. Yes.
Mr. Wong, what do you make of the use of Zun back in the days? Because we understand it is a kind of sacrificial vessel with special symbolism. What does its discovery tell us about the culture in Sanxingdui?
As Dr. Fan just said, the use of Zun was of a special ritual purpose. And my point here would be that, as we know from Sanxingdui, we find quite a few Zuns, also from pit 1 and pit 4 many years ago. And this time we are going to expect perhaps a few more. But in terms of bronze typology, one type of bronze is relatively lacking, especially what we know as the four-legged large dings, ding, which is the most important and symbolic embodiment of central power, at least according to later traditions in Chinese historiography, and also evidenced by archaeological excavations. I think this contrast between bronze typology as we know from Sanxingdui and bronze typology as we know from especially the Central Plain on the Yellow River would tell us something about the nature of Sanxingdui culture. And we know some scholars or outsiders have noticed that Sanxingdui produced the famous golden staff. And there are scholars who take this as evidence that Sanxingdui at that time had a totally independent tradition, which had nothing to do with the Central Plain. But if taking into consideration the contrast between bronze typology between Sanxingdui and the Central Plain, we may proceed to ask some interesting questions. Because apparently the Sanxingdui people were capable of making fantastic zuns. Why not four-legged large dings? And this contrast can be interpreted as a kind of difference, but at the same time, if we see from a different angle, it hints at rather more about connection than, let's say, independence or isolation. Well, in addition to what Dr. Fan just said, I think this is how much that comes up to my mind. Thank you.
Mr. Wong, we'll leave you there. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to discuss this further on our coverage. But for now, I'd like to get it back to CGTN's Ji Xiaojun, who is joined by Xie Zhenbing, Director of the Cultural Heritage Conservation and Restoration Center at the Cultural Relics and Archaeology Research Institute of Sichuan Province. Xiaojun, what do you have for us?
Indeed, I'm now joined by Mr. Xie, an expert in conservation, relics, conservation and protection. 谢主任，那文保部门
Director
这次
Xie,
在整个发掘过程
And I
当中，
want
什
to
么时候开始参
understand
与？
when did preservation work get involved in the archaeology? Actually, we excavated pit number 3 back in 2019. We started to get involved. Why you get involved so early? We still work with the government and our colleagues. We want to better preserve the relics and collect the information we need. Start from 2019, we have come up with a plan to preserve the unearthed relics and also a guideline and transportation of the relics. We also set up an emergency platform to preserve the relics. This is a systemic work. After the relics being unearthed, we want to better preserve these relics and collect information we need.
历史的一些信息，
Just to
就是
gather
在
some
考古过程
information
当
of
中
the
的每
history.
一个步骤
So
都
for
对
every
提
step
取
of
信息
the
都对保护文
archaeology,
物至关重
it's
要
very
啊。那
important
我们来
for us
提一
to
个
preserve the
例
relic.
子啊，我们知道在3号坑提取了一个
We know
大的
in
这个
pit
方尊，
3, we
这个
actually
方尊在
extract
提取过程
a
当中，
large bronze
从文
stone.
保的角度来
So
看，
from the
有多困
preservation
难？
aspect, what are the challenges? On one side, for the bronze stone is quite large in size, so the height is 75 centimeters, and as this zone is filled with plasters and soil, so it is about like 150 kilogram. And also when we lift this zone, we also have to understand some of the relics buried below this zone, and also it is heavily corrosion and also deterioration. So when we are trying to extract this bronze stone, it is very difficult to put a cover to lift this bronze stone. That's why we do a lot of isolation and reinforcement of this bronze stone. So all of these
就
pose
是因为
challenges for
就是
us.
怕这个过程会对文物
So we are
造
quite
成
worried
一些
that
损
we
坏
will。maybe damage this bronzeware. Yes, during the procedure of the extraction, when we move this bronze stone, we have to be careful. Also, we have to consider the stacking and the relics buried below
因为
the
有一
bronze
些未
stone.
知的一些信息
There are
啊
a。lot of
那么这次我们
uncertainties for the extraction work.
在这个新的考古现场，我们也发现
And
了
this
不同
time
类
in
别
the
的一些文物。我
excavation
们看
site,
到
we
有
find different types
象
of
牙
the
有青铜器，
um,
有玉器
relics. For
有金
example,
器
we have
有
bronzeware,
陶器
elephant tusk,
还有
we have
木
gold
器
ware,
那所有
wood
这些不
pieces,
同类别的文物当
ivories,
中，您觉
etc.
得
For
从
all
文
these
保
different
的角
kinds
度
of
来看，
relics, from the
什么
preservation
哪个
perspective,
类别保护是最
as for the level of difficulty, what is the most difficult one to preserve? I think it's very difficult
为什
for
么？
us to preserve the elephant tusk. Because for the elephant tusk, we used to come up with a plan to preserve the elephant tusk. But it is a global challenge to preserve the elephant tusk. So right now we do not have necessary measures to preserve the tusk in different parts of the world. In the elephant tusk unearthed from Sanxingdui site, as these tusks has been buried in different pits and they're in different
那
conditions,
我看着
all
它
of
还是
these
一
are
个完整的
challenges.
一个状态。
But
难
from
道
the
它里面也不
appearance,
是
I
象牙了吗？
think
因为
it
有
is
烧
quite
过的痕迹，
intact.
我知道。
I do see some traces of burns. What is the condition of the tusk? Actually, in pit 4, actually all of those tusks is turned into bits and pieces, and they're just like residues of tusks. If we look at pit number 3, some of the unearthed elephant tusks are in better condition. So if we look at the appearance, it looks quite intact, but still there are a lot of cracks on top of the surface in pit 7 and pit 8. If we look at the situation,
7号8号里
also
面也
very
有象牙。
residues of the tusk. We also have tusks in pit number 7 and 8. From the outside, we think it's tusks, but actually they're just turned into powders. So the
就
preservation
一
is
句话，青
difficult.
铜器保存
All in
难吗？
all,
保护难吗？
Is it difficult to preserve the bronzeware? Well, we need to look at the textures. It's better than the elephant
那
tusk.
我们再问一句哈，
Another
我们公众
question.
也很关心这次正
And
在
the
进行发
public
掘，
is
但我
also
们公
interested
众到
in
底
your
什么
work
时
of
候可以
excavation,
看到我
and
们
we are
三星堆
eager
这次
to
新
know
发掘出
when
来的
could
文物。
we see
这
all
个我们
those
可能是
objects and
也
artifacts
根据我们
discovered
这个
this
器
time.
物它本身的情况，有些
It
器物
depends on
如
the
果保
status
存
quo
得
of
特别
those
好的话，
artifacts,
我们
whether they
经
are
过前
very
期的
well
一些
preserved, and after the
研究
first
这个
round
从
of
现实提
studies
取完了
and
考古
information
那
collection,
个资
as
料
well
检验完了
as
之后
the
可能很快就能给
archaeological
发现界
restoration,
面，但是
we
有些
can
文物
let
如果
them
它
to
保存
meet the
状况
public
不
as soon
好
as
它
possible.
修复的话会
However,
有点
for the
大的话
other
可能
artifacts
这个时
which
间就会长一
require
些。
greater
那您给我一个时
amount
间
of
是
work
几
of
个月呀，还是几
restoration,
年
we
呢？
have to wait
可
longer.
能极
How
快的
long
哈
will it
可能
be?
也要1年左右。但是我跟大家说一个
It
好
will
消
be
息，
in a
就是我们
year
在三星堆博物
at
馆
the
有一个
early
开放
stage.
式的
But still,
陈列展览
here
馆。我
around
们
the
在做修复
Sanxingdui
的时候，观
ruins,
众
we
也
have
可以
an
看到我们这个文物
exhibition
修复
window
修
through
复的过
which you
程，我
can
们修好
see
的文物也
how
会
we are doing
及
our
时地
work
跑到
of
那个陈
restoration.
列展览馆给大家见
You
面。
can come to this
谢谢您，谢谢
exhibition
主任。
hall to have a look
谢谢。
at our
好，
work.
谢谢
Thank
您。
you very much.
And that was Mr. Xie, Director, an expert in relics conservation and protection. Now, as we're now coming to my reporting at the excavation site, I would also like to take this opportunity to share with you some of my observations. One, I'm deeply impressed by the fact that all measures, all technologies, all personnel, all institutes, even when they feel they have a role to play in the excavation and research, they'll be invited, they'll be involved. This is all done to make sure that all historical information is extracted and no information, no historical data is to be missed. And that is why they are now recording, scanning, and documenting all details. And even if when they feel that technology for now is not enough to make further analysis, they don't want to rule out the possibilities, and that is why they are now storing all these extracted earth samples from the 6 pits. And second, I'm also deeply impressed by the fact that all experts, scholars, researchers are extremely open to expressing their views, which might differ from each other, which makes the excavation this time or the research of Sanxingdui culture even more intriguing, as there are so many questions waiting to be answered. Who were they? Where did they come from? Where did they go after Sanxingdui culture? We're hoping that this time more historical information will be extracted from the artifacts to be unearthed from the 6 newly found pits, and certainly we'll keep you updated in our program, and we do hope that their research will help us understand better Sanxingdui culture. Back to you, Zhongshi.
Xiaojun, special thanks to you for asking for us about the time at which we can start to appreciate the beauty of all of these relics. We'll certainly keep a close watch and an open mind to possibly new information that will come from the finds this time. CGTN's Ji Xiaojun, thank you so much. And China is one of the world's 4 ancient civilizations. The discovery of the ancient ruins of Sanxingdui proves the pluralistic integration and evolution of Chinese culture. Exchanges and mutual learning among different civilizations leads to the thrive of the Chinese civilization. We get more details from CGTN's Xing Ruinan.
Where did Chinese civilization begin? Before the 1980s, the dominant idea in academic circles was that it originated mainly from the Yellow River Basin. However, with the discovery of Sanxingdui and 2 other archaeological sites, scholarly understanding of the evolution of Chinese civilization is expanding. The renowned Chinese archaeologist Su Bingqi, who died in 1997, highlighted the importance of the Sanxingdui ruins in southwest China's Sichuan province. Su believed Sanxingdui was once the site of the ancient Shu kingdom, which is said to have emerged around the time of China's first known dynasty, the Xia, which ruled from 2070 to 1600 BCE. Su Bingqi's view has now become a consensus among scholars. Archaeologist Zhao Hui from Peking University believes origins of Chinese civilization is a competition and independent development of various civilizations. Experts believe that the Sanxingdui ruins represented a culture that flourished in the upper reaches of the Yangtze River nearly 3,000 years ago. It then came into contact and integrated with other civilizations thriving in the Yellow River Basin and the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River. Sanxingdui is regarded as an important witness to the integrated development of Chinese civilization. This is why efforts to pursue research and protect the archaeological value of this site are being strengthened. Xin Ruinan, CGTN.
Let's now continue with our discussion about the Chinese civilization. Mr. Wang, let me start with you. Scholars say that openness and richness are characteristics of Chinese civilization. Do you agree? What does it mean, and how is that reflected in the Sanxingdui ruins?
Yes, of course. I think this is a good way to describe Chinese civilization, richness and openness. And in fact, all civilizations have to be open and rich in order to survive simply. Perhaps this is one of the most important lessons that we learn from history. Well, and it can be proven by the long history of China, although sometimes the history can be painful, can be quite painful. Well, in terms of how to say, as you just used, scholars have sometimes used the phrase pluralistic integration to describe the early development of Chinese civilization. In general, I think this phrase, pluralistic integration, it gets to the point. But in my opinion, one aspect of the process, I think it needs to be further stressed, which is human creativity along the way of this kind of integration. Because that's why I prefer openness and richness, because the openness of Chinese civilization realizes, let's say, in its confident richness. Well, with this understanding, with these nuances, coming back to Sanxingdui, I think the findings joined to evidence to show the same rule, namely the openness, the cultural openness at Sanxingdui, as attested by the fantastic material findings, and shows immediately its richness that can only be achieved through the creativity of the people living there at Sanxingdui at those times. I think this is one way of looking at Sanxingdui as an exemplar of Chinese civilization. Well, Sanxingdui in particular and Chinese civilization in general, they follow, let's say, the same rule. Thank you.
Dr. Fan, let's stay on this topic of richness and openness. Richness is easier to understand. We had, even back in 1986, we had a rich harvest of relics, pointing to a very rich and vibrant culture dating back 3,000 to 5,000 years. This time, we're only going to find out more and richer artifacts. Can you point us to some newly unearthed artifacts which could show, well, the openness of Chinese civilization? How do we understand the aspect of openness?
Well, as I have indicated many times on this show, that archaeology is a scientific discipline based on material evidences excavated from the ground. So just like other scholars or other experts from other disciplines, historians, anthropologists, archaeologists, we study history, or we study the pattern or the model of the development of Chinese civilization through archaeological evidences, archaeological discoveries. Like here in Sanxingdui site, we have discovered many bronze vessels and potteries, and also some golden objects. And besides that, we also discovered the whole city, the walled city. All of these material evidences have indicates that Sanxingdui culture, or during this period, Sanxingdui site was the heart of the Chengdu plain, or for this whole area. Just like here in the upper Yangtze River region, one of the greatest or famous archaeologists, Su Bingqi, he ever divided the China into 6 different cultural regions, like in the northern part, eastern part, southeast part, southwest part, and also the southwest part. So after his series of region, series, and types, archaeologists all from China, we have worked for decades to bring more information, more evidences to support this theory, and which have already been, I think, broadly accepted by the academia, not only in China, but also for the whole international colleagues. Yes.
Dr. Fan, Mr. Wong, thank you. Please stay with me here on our program. Now, similar ancestral types of bronze and jade items unearthed at Sanxingdui can also be found in the Central Plains or other areas along the Yangtze River. Experts believe these discoveries in China's different areas is evidence of frequent exchanges and the unified, diverse origin of the Chinese civilization. Now, let's bring in 2 of our reporters for more on these archaeological discoveries. I have Xia Ruixue at the Yinshui Palace and Temple Historic Site, and Wu Lai in the city of Hangzhou, located in the lower reach of the Yangtze River. Ruixue and Wu Lai, great to have both of you on our coverage today. Let's first start with Ruixue in Anyang, central China's Henan province. Ruixue, like Sanxingdui, Yinshui is also famous for its ancient bronze wares. I'm not trying to start a competition between the two, but I do wonder what the major differences are, and what about the Yinshui bronze ware? Can you tell us today?
Yes, Zhongshi, I'm standing at the Yinshui ruins in Anyang City, central China's Henan province. It once was the capital city of the late Shang dynasty, dating back more than 3,000 years. It's well known for its discovery of the 150,000 pieces of oracle bones inscribed with hieroglyphics. It was the earliest Chinese writings to be discovered to this day. Apart from the large number of oracle bones, researchers have also brought to light over 10,000 pieces of bronze wares, of which the largest is Simu Wuding. In Sanxingdui ruins, a large number of bronze wares were excavated as well. What are the differences of them between these 2 ruins? First of all, experts say that both of their bronze ware making reached a high level, both in technical and artistic terms. But the size of the bronze wares in Yinshui ruins were way much bigger, and their images on the bronze wares were more delicate. For instance, the world's largest bronze wares, Simu Wuding, measures 133 centimeters high and weighs 875 kilograms. They might even know how to weld the bronze wares because it was very large. Second, in Yinshui ruins, most of the bronze wares were ordinary cookware, wine containers, weapons, decorations, and large ceremonial urns. They were buried with the tomb owners as funeral objects, while in Sanxingdui, the recent discoveries further confirm that the theory that the pits were used for sacrificial purposes, as many of the tombs found had been smashed and burned before being buried. The masks and heads with their bizarre looks look like the work of aliens because no human race looks like them. Experts say that they were made that way because they were related to religious sacrifice and are used in rituals to venerate ancestors. Zhongshi, that's the difference of them.
Understood. Ruixue, let's go beyond just bronzeware and talk about unearthed artifacts in general, because based on the archaeological discoveries, some believe that vassal states in the Central Plains were upgrading their weapons around 3,000 years ago, and meanwhile people in the fertile Sichuan basin were making exquisite ritual items, as you were pointing out just now. How do the artifacts unearthed in Yinshui differ from those found in Sanxingdui in Sichuan?
Yes, indeed. We often say that the Central China Plain is a region generally regarded as a cradle of Chinese civilization. For instance, historical records show that the western part of Henan province was the central areas for activities in the Xia dynasty, China's first dynasty in the recorded history. And then Yingshu ruins here represents Chinese culture in the later Shang dynasty. But generations of archaeologists have attempted to prove its existence as more than a mere myth through a succession of excavations. This morning, they examined that the relics from number 4 pit of Sanxingdui ruins can date back to the late Shang dynasty. So they share the same time with Yingshu ruins. It offers unshakable proof that the Chinese civilizations have several cradles, including the Yellow River and the Yangtze River valleys. Are those two civilizations completely different? The answer is no. For instance, two ruins have great achievement in the bronze art. They both share the same kind of yunlei patterns on their bronze wares and jade artifacts. Another example is that Sanxingdui ruins, stone and bronze dagger access were unearthed in the number 8 pit. They were ritual objects. Same kind of bronze dagger access were found in Yingshu ruins as well. They were used as real weapons in the war and buried with two mourners after they died. And in Sanxingdui ruins, they have unearthed bronze celestial trees and a standing man statue, which are very big and very impressive. Experts say that people might have grasped the techniques of welding the bronze wares too. So these artifacts show that the Sanxingdui site had a close connection with central China, but it also marked an original Asian civilization in Sichuan with strong creativity. So we have more than one cradle of civilizations, and they were connected. So that's a huge discovery. Back to you, Zhongshi.
Fascinating scenarios indeed. CGTN Xiaoyue in Anyang, Henan province. Appreciate your report. Now let's explore further that theory of multiple origins of the Chinese civilization. The discovery of ancient ruins along the Yangtze River also highlight the diverse origins of Chinese civilization. CGTN's Wu Lei is in the city of Hangzhou in East China's Zhejiang province. Wu Lei, you're at the China National Silk Museum right now. We know at Sanxingdui, experts say they've detected fibrin in some soil samples. This is a protein-present in silk, which is produced by numerous insects. Let's talk more about the role of silk in Chinese history and culture.
Indeed, Zhongshi, we are now in China's largest silk museum, which houses thousands of beautiful and fragmented silk products from thousands of years ago. Besides displaying, this place has also a professional restoring studio. As you can see, these conservators are now repairing these beautiful ancient silk clothes. Actually, the ancient Greeks and Romans once called China as the land of the silk, because over the past century, archaeological discoveries have shown that the silk-making tools as well as the fragments of the silk clothes have been discovered in many parts of China, including Sanxingdui, as you mentioned, which shows that Chinese people have been practiced the silk weaving and also silk worms. The techniques have been for thousands of years, as early as over 5,000 years ago. So silk has become another evidence to show the diverse and consistence of the Chinese civilization. And for more, I'm very glad to be joined by Dr. Zhao Feng, the director of the China National Silk Museum. Hello, Dr. Zhao. Thank you very much for joining our program. So, according to the archaeological discovery, the silk has been found in many parts of the country, including Sanxingdui. Where was the origin of the silk from the point of the archaeological discoveries?
Okay, actually we have lots of findings, but the earliest evidences we found is mainly around the Yellow River. So here are some examples. One is from Xiyin village, Xiyin site, or the northern part bank of the Yellow River. And also we have found another one in the southern parts of the Yellow River. Both of them can be dated back to 5,000 years ago, even back to 6,000 years ago. But Yellow River is not the only place we found the silk textiles. In the southern parts, in southern China, we also find some early silk textiles date back to the 4,000 years ago. And here we can see some other beautiful, complete garments which are made by silk. This one was found in Jinzhou, in the middle region of the Yangtze River. But the dates of this one is the Warring States, more than 2,000 years ago.
So we can see that this silk can be transmitted from the central part of China to the Yangtze River Delta. And also, the last question is about the silk restoring. How important is about the silk restoring to protecting the silk culture?
Yes, it's very important because when we do the whole process of the Silk Museum, from the collection, conservation, and also exhibition, the research for the conservation is a key step. Otherwise, we will not have this kind of materials existing. So let me see. So let's see something else. So these are the trousers and also the shoe. Pair of shoes we found in Zhejiang province from the Southern Song dynasty. Southern Song dynasty is more or less like 800 years ago. That time, Zhejiang became home of the silk production. And
okay, thank you very much. That's Dr. Zhao Feng from the China National Silk Museum. So as we know that silk protection is a key step for protecting these kind of old cultures. After being discovered and being restored, these relics will be accessible for visitors all year round. So people will have a better understanding about the culture, the history, and exchanges behind these ancient relics. 钟师。
CGTN's Wu Lai with a live report for us today. Wu Lai, thank you so much. Let's get back to our discussion with Dr. Fan and Mr. Wong. Mr. Wong, you've been hearing our reporters talk about civilization. Civilization is a grand topic, but at the end of the day, the reason we carry out archaeological work is to understand better Chinese civilization. At the end of the day, a lot of the work that we do on the ground points to how Chinese civilization originated and developed. So when you hear our reporter in Henan say that it's likely that there has been contact and communication between Sanxingdui and the cultures we had in the Central Plain, what is it that the Sanxingdui shares with other subcultures of Chinese civilization, and what do you think is unique about Sanxingdui?
Thank you. This is at the same time a very interesting and a very difficult question. First of all, to speak of the uniqueness of Sanxingdui, we need perhaps to divide, to categorize what kind of connections, what kind of differences between Sanxingdui and the other subcultures in China. In very general terms, again, on the subsistence level, let's say, based on archaeological work, we now know Sanxingdui at its peak time was likely also based on rice agriculture, let's say. And well, at the same time, city building in Sanxingdui, especially the construction of walls, seem to have connections with regions along the Yangtze River. Well, on the other hand, on the higher level, the elite level of ritualistic or symbolic artifacts, it seems Sanxingdui was both related to the Central Plain on the Yellow River and
Mr. Wong,
other
hold that
regions.
thought. We're going to turn back to Sanxingdui to see more about what is being done there.
Let's continue with our discovery inside this excavation site together with Mr. Wang Wei. We're about to give you the updates about our excavation. Back to the pit 4. You can see that we have made a lot of progress about the extraction about that ceramic. And our workers are going on with their work. Still, that piece of gold is covered by the ceramics, and we are cleaning away the mud covering that piece of gold. After so many years, thousands of years of burial, still we can see the glitter of the gold, and it's amazing. In the very beginning, we thought it has only a length of several centimeters, but after unfolding that piece, you can see it's more than 30 centimeters. It's a very long piece, and we can expect to see a certain rod of gold. Is that the one of the ends of it? It's been folded, and for the gold rod, it must have two round extremes. And also, by the shape of the ends, you can also tell its function. The previously discovered gold rod has a total length of 142 centimeters, and this one was quite close to the pit head. And together with it, we have discovered other pieces of the ivory, elephant tusks, etc. In the past, we have also discovered some fish-shaped gold foils, and this time, I believe it's not that fish-shaped like foil. It's more like the gold rod. And most of these gold wares discovered in the Sanxingdui ruins have a rather high content of gold, and although it's a mixture of gold and silver, but the content of gold is more than 80%, so it's quite pure gold. Amazing glitters of the gold. And you can see that we have quite a lot of difficulties in cleaning away the soil and also the ceramics covering that gold. And we have turned to the both sides of the gold pieces. If we are not sure for the total collection of that ceramics, then we have to be more prudent. We have to start from another angle for the extraction. We can have a look at this folded part of the gold. And then another part of it is still buried inside the soil. We don't know how many more folds are there. When we are collecting previously that massive gold facial mask from the pit, we have not expected to see such a mask because it's been folded several times. And also we can see that our ancestors have grasped really high level of the techniques for the cutting, like the hollow cutting, and also the other manufacturing techniques with the gold. Are they collecting the soil or the bronze remains? It's the soil, I believe. So maybe we have to give more time to this work of extraction. We may not expect to see the whole look of this gold during today's live streaming program. And our workers, they are working very hard in order to extract that piece of gold. And they also have a very interesting sentence written on the back of their protective clothing. And this person has been working like this for more than 1 hour. It's really hard work. We hope that he could bring to us more surprises. And according to our center, we know that that oval jade has been transferred to the laboratory. To you, Zhao Jing. Yes, we are in the built-in laboratory inside the excavation site. After the extraction of that oval-shaped jade from the pit, we have moved it to this built-in laboratory for the preliminary studies and analysis. And now we are using this microscope of the super depth of field. We can see in general it's in white color. There's no motif or any patterns on the surface of it. And the general conditions are very good. It's very well kept. But still, we have noticed some cracks on the surface of the jade. And around those cracks, we have noticed some yellow color. It may be due to the soaking of the mud. After the extraction of each piece, we can run the preliminary test on site inside this built-in laboratory. It's quite meaningful. And inside this built-in laboratory, we have not only that microscope of superpower, but also a portable infrared spectrum machine. Now we're about to run another test with this infrared spectrum to know exactly the nature and quality of our jade piece. This is a kind of non-destructive testing method, and very quickly we can know the preliminary conclusion about the classification of this jade material. We have also a computer screen connected to this machine, and immediately we would know the answer.
Right now, the experts are looking at the screen to analyze the composition of the jade. Now we are looking at the spectrum chart, and there are some changes on the graph on the chart. Have we come up with the conclusion? Yes. First, we need to use this high-power microscope to observe the surface of the jade, and we found there's a little crack on the other side of the jade, and in general the texture is quite good, very smooth and silky, and also we are using the spectrum machine to identify the category of the jade. By using the infrared spectrum, we will look at the shape of the graph and also compare the value of the peak in our database. We think this is a yellow and white jade. Thank you very much for your introduction. So today we just got a preliminary conclusion of the category of the jade, but we still need to visit the laboratory to understand better. Back to you, Guangquan. Thank you very much. So according to our analysis, it feels like a yellow and white jade, and this kind of jade actually originated from Liaoning province. This is because of the exchange of the civilization. I believe in the period of Yin, they actually have a frequent travel and communication with Sanxingdui. So this is a new clue. So now we move to pit number 3. We have the most number of relics unearthed from pit number 3. So right now we are trying to leave the relics covered below the bronze ware. So we just talk about the trade. So right now you look into the pit, you could see some of the shells. Some people are saying maybe these shells has been transported to Sanxingdui through the southern Silk Road. What do you think? Actually, for seashells, they're quite valuable in Shang Dynasty. In the Western Zhou Dynasty, people are using the seashell as the currency. And also people are putting these shells to make a necklace. In the Shang Dynasty, in the central areas, we also found a lot of seashells. And some people are saying these shells may come from the Indian Ocean. However, according to our analysis, we think maybe these shells coming from South China Sea. So we need to have further observation of these shells. So it is possible these shells actually coming from the Shang Dynasty, from the Central Plain. Maybe there is some exchange of the trade, or maybe the Shang Dynasty have sent this kind of shell as gift to Sanxingdui site. So if we look at this bronzeware, it's quite exquisite. We see some of the motif of birds. And for some parts, you could see it has been covered. It's a very typical bronzeware with the beast head and the bird body. And if we look at the motif, actually bird is a representative motif for these bronzes. We also think of the Bashu figure language. Actually, in Sanxingdui, we have unearthed a lot of relics with patterns, but we are not able to find out characters or language from Sanxingdui site. in pit 1 and pit 2, we found different types of patterns. And actually, we done some studies about the patterns from the warring states. And we think these patterns are different from the figure language from the Ba and Shu. So right now, we don't have any proof to see that there's language existed in Sanxingdui site. So when we are seeing a bronze on one side, maybe we have some figures of Ba and Shu, and also we may have some oracle bones of inscription. So that is an ideal situation. It's not likely to see such kind of bronze. And for this one, it's quite intact. Back in the warring state, I think the language also quite different. If we look at the vases, we could see they also carried significance back in those ancient times. So right now we are seeing one of the bronzeware has been smashed and broken into pieces. Could see the body is quite large and also in a concave shape. It's hard to tell the shape of this bronzeware. So for this piece, it's actually smashed by the bronzeware. And also some carbonization inside of this vessel. We used to see some of these shells stored in the vessels. So probably these vessels are actually coming out from different kinds of containers. In pit number 2, we do see some of the shells have been stored for thousands of years inside of the container. In Lei and Zun, back in Shang Dynasty, they're actually drinking vessels. However, later on, these vases have become treasures. Now we are looking at, I believe this is a large face mask. No, actually that is the branches of the bronze sacred tree. In pit number 2, we unearthed 3 bronze trees. Probably today we'll introduce the restoration for one of the bronze tree. If we look at the size, and I believe this one is quite large in size, maybe we will have a large bronze tree unearthed from this pit. We are looking forward to it. Hopefully we could find more missing pieces. And also we have some strange statue. And this is also similar to a altar. We have a plate as the foundation, and also we could see the feet, the legs, and also the hands of human body, also the copper wire. We have 4 pillars supporting the platform. Now you could see the feet of this human body. But we do not have the head for this figure. This is quite strange, but this is also considered as an altar. It is different from the other figure we found earlier with a human body holding a vase on his head. So I believe this one is also used for sacrificial activities, and this may have some relation with the bronze tree. So maybe these 2 are one piece, or maybe these 2 are separate. We have to consider all the possibilities. Now we are seeing the ears of the large face mask. For this bronze face mask, according to our estimation, the height is 74 centimeters, and also the width is 135. I believe this one is even larger than the face mask with protruding eyes. For that one, it has very large eyes. If we look at the size, I think this one may be the largest bronze face mask, even though it is face down. But I think this one do not have protruding eyes. This one is probably similar to the gold mask. We are quite expecting to see the complete view of this mask. Maybe it will be out of shape, but however, we think the size is very large. This probably will be the largest bronze face mark we found so far.
其他的大部分地方都是保湿进行。
And for the other areas, now you could see we're doing a lot of hydration to preserve the relics. And in the middle part, we have preserved some of the elephant tusk. So we have to lift this elephant tusk first, and then we could see the front part of this face mask.
So this facial mask in bronze is facing down. So now we'd like to take a break and back to the studio of Beijing.
It seems to be an incredibly busy and rewarding day there at the pits in Sanxingdui. Archaeologists have discovered some bronze pits in Pit 3 as well, which are believed to be part of a bronze divine tree. And you just heard from our expert there at the site. 3 bronze trees were discovered from pit number 2 during the last excavation campaign, of course. And if you make your way to the museum at Sanxingdui now, you're going to find a complete bronze tree standing at a height of 4 meters.
Now we are inside the Center of Relics Preservation, but we'd like to take this moment to tell you about the restoration of this bronze sacred tree. As you can see, the restoration of all those bronze wares is still going on. And in recent days, we're also busy repairing that bronze sacred tree. Previously, we can notice that 70 more separate parts are scattered on the table, but now we have progressed a lot with this major part of the sacred tree standing on the table, and our experts are going on with this restoration. Mr. Yu, what are you doing now? For the sacred bronze tree number 3, we have basically completed the preliminary restoration. We can see that we have 3 trunks here, and also it can be separated into 3 layers. First layer of the single branches, and second layer with dual branches. In total, there are 9 different branches, and by the end of the trunk, we can see a statue of the human head bird body. It's a very peculiar shape, and you can also see how wired the imagination was from our ancestors. Compared to the previous 2 sacred bronze trees, the most important character of it is the multiple numbers of the branches, because for the number 1 and number 2 bronze sacred trees, they only have 1 trunk only. And also for that statue of human head and bird body, it's also one of the unique features of the number 3 sacred bronze tree. In talking about our restoration, what is your guideline? For the restoration of the number 3 sacred bronze tree, we have to study their fractions. For example, whether those separate branches and the remaining parts could be perfectly restored to those fractures and conjunctions, and also by each main branch or the trunk. We can find some welding positions. This is also the proof or the guideline, some clues for our restoration. You can find easily those welding points, the remainings of those welding points, and those would guide us to the correct position. All those information and clues could help us to continue with the restoration work. What about the other details concerning this restoration? Because currently you are just preliminarily started the restoration. Next up, we will complete the whole restoration. For example, for the statue of the human head and bird body, for one side, the feather and also the wing of this statue is missing. So we have to create some supplementary parts in order to add it up to the sacred bronze tree. And also we can see the crowns of decoration on the head of the statue is also missing. We have to catch up with that part too. And some other hanging ornaments parts are also missing because we don't have any references to look at, so we will just leave it like that. After completing the whole restoration work, we will let this statue and also the sacred tree to meet the public as soon as possible inside the museum. Now we can see that it will be a very long process for the restoration. Maybe you have this question, why we have waited so long for the restoration for the sacred tree. And for the number 1 and number 2 sacred bronze tree, it has also taken us more than 1 decade. This is a very tall sacred bronze tree with a height of 3.96 meters. With only all the elements in place, have we just decided to start the final restoration. And our experts has also made a lot of preparatory work. And what are these? Could you please talk about it? For example, we have run a lot of preliminary tests in collaboration with the Palace Museum and the Science and Technology University of Beijing. We have run the CT scanning on the whole body of the number 3 sacred bronze tree to know its status quo and also its inner structures. For example, this is the image of the statue of the human head and bird body. We can tell they're separately cast. For all the body parts of the statue, it's cast separately, and finally we have welded all of them together. And this kind of welding technology can also be found in other artifacts collected from the Sanxingdui ruins. From all those examples, you can tell that our ancestors have already been equipped with really advanced technologies of the casting and welding, and all those artifacts could also help us out in better understanding of the mysteries behind the Sanxingdui ruins. We also have the CT scanning and other technologies like the digital tools to help us with the restoration and repairing, and they can also help us to set up the restoration plans, and also to present the results of the civilization of Sanxingdui to the public. Thank you very much. Now, with the advancement of science and technology, whether for the archaeological excavation or for the further restoration of the artifacts, we can receive a lot of help. We really hope that in an earlier date we can meet these statues and the sacred trees.
Yeah, I was going to say that bronze trees were also found with the last excavation campaign. They were found in bits and pieces. It literally took people years to put them back together. And if you make your way to the museum now at Sanxingdui, you get to appreciate the beauty of the tree after it has been restored. It's standing at a whopping 4 meters tall. Absolutely breathtaking. It's one of their biggest treasures at the museum and certainly one of the most popular with visitors. Now, archaeologists have so far found no trace of a written language at the Sanxingdui ruins. Ancient characters would help archaeologists and historians crack the mystery of the Shu Kingdom, an ancient civilization dating back 5,000 years in southwest China's Sichuan province. And our next story looks at the likelihood of characters being found at Sanxingdui.
Traces of tall city walls, dense housing, and thousands of artifacts have been discovered at the site of the Sanxingdui ruins. Experts say it shows the Shu Kingdom was a civilization with all the necessary elements of a nation, which means the people had the conditions to create a written language or characters.
A bronze civilization as high as Sanxingdui should have the ability to create mature characters, but there is no evidence to prove it.
As of now, there are no signs of a written language in the 6 new pits. Archaeologists speculate this may be because the objects in which the characters were written are not easily preserved.
Perhaps these words were written on some organic objects such as lacquer ware, woodware, or even silk, and such things are not easily preserved.
Chinese culture is diverse. Each region has its own unique civilization. For example, words were inscribed on oracle bones in the Shang dynasty which can be preserved. I think Sanxingdui culture may have had other customs to record words.
Bronze and gold rods discovered at the Sanxingdui ruins are engraved with a large number of symbols. Are these symbols just patterns, or could they be words?
When multiple symbols are combined to present meaning, they have the function of characters. But the symbols found on Sanxingdui artifacts are single, so they cannot be defined as characters. The oracle bone inscriptions from the Shang dynasty are a complex system. The development of oracle bone inscriptions was a long-term process, and it has a long prehistoric origin waiting for us to discover. So no discovery of characters from Sanxingdui at present does not mean that they never existed.
The development of characters is a very slow process. Experts say that if a certain pattern or symbol can express meaning clearly, it means the function of the symbol is similar to a written language. Symbols can evolve over time, as with ancient Chinese characters, and some experts say symbols discovered at the Sanxingdui ruins may be one of the earliest sources of Chinese characters.
Let's now talk about the possibility of a written language in the Sanxingdui culture. Mr. Wong, correct me if I'm wrong here. The fact is, so far there's been no evidence of any writing at the Sanxingdui ruins, but we did hear from experts that there had been patterns. What type of patterns and what purposes could they serve in understanding the culture?
Writings, let's say, talking about writing, it's actually quite a tricky question because when we are talking about Chinese characters, we are presume that we presume that we are talking about a writing system. Well, the narrow definition of a writing system is that all of the signs or symbols within this coherent system are used for the representation of usually one particular spoken language. This is the narrowest definition of a writing system. Well, in this sense, apparently up to this day, although some researchers have said that this or that sign from Sanxingdui or other sites on the Chengdu Plain could be interpreted as characters or ancestors of later characters, but apparently they do not fit into this definition of a writing system that makes characters true characters as part of the writing system. Well, a broader, a more general definition of writing system, we can say, well, it cannot, it should not be only for one language, let's say. As long as the coherent system of signs or symbols is used to represent or convey message that describes the living environment, this is a writing system. It does not have to correspond one-to-one to a spoken language, let's say. Well, this is a broader in a way. We are inclined to use this second definition, but the thing is, back to Sanxingdui, to my knowledge, I really, it's really even more difficult to predict whether we can have, we can expect a writing system from there. First of all, are we going to have a coherent system of signs? This is one question. Second, even we do find a lot of signs, unless they are characters that we can recognize, we need to study them and define them and to see if they can in any way to be categorized as a writing system. I won't exclude the possibility to find true writing characters from Sanxingdui, but this is, we have to stay open.
Understood. Dr. Fan, can I get your thoughts on this topic also?
According to the complexity and the sophistication of Sanxingdui culture, I think there must be some kinds of recording systems by the Sanxingdui people. But it is difficult to say there were, writing systems during that period because there has no evidence has been digged out. But think about maybe it's just a possibility, a hypothesis. Maybe the writing system may write on some, organic materials that is difficult to find out, or they have, can't be dug out from the excavation. So it's another hypothesis might be that because of the writing system or knowing how to write is a very important or very pressure activity that was controlled by the higher class of the society. Because of the Sanxingdui cultural period is at the same time with the latter part of Yinshang. So we've already know that Yinshang people or the Yinshang period, they have the writing system which have been proved by lots of oracle bones and inscriptions on bronze vessels. But probably despite of the communication between Sanxingdui and Yinshang, maybe the notables of Yinshang, they control the writing system as a secret. So that's both of this could be a possibility in history. But it's difficult to have a conclusion now. We need more information, more evidences from the excavation.
All right, understood. Thank you. And joining me now, Professor Jing Zhichun, Canada Research Chair in Pacific Asia Archaeology of the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. He has analyzed jades unearthed from Sanxingdui. Professor, let me ask you this. How is the rest of the world observing these archaeological discoveries in China?
Mr. Zhongshi, thank you so much for having me on your show again. About 21 or 22 years ago, there was a very important exhibition in Washington, D.C. Titled The Golden Age for the Chinese Archaeology. Both academics and the public in the U.S. and other countries were fascinated by many great discoveries made during the second half of the 20th century, which was called the Golden Age for the Chinese Archaeology. With all recent advance in Chinese archaeology, I would say archaeology today in China is really in a new and transformative phase of Golden Age in terms of not only numerous surprising discovery made every year, but also the public interest, the use of the state-of-the-art technology, increasing consciousness of protection of the cultural heritage, as well as full support from government leadership and the local community. Here I use the example to show the great interest the rest of the world has had in recent archaeological discovery in China. Founded in 2013, Shanghai Archaeology Forum is a global initiative dedicated to promoting investigation, protection, and the utilization of the world archaeological resources and heritage. The forum has been held every other year since 2013. On average, 250 or 300 distinguished archaeologists from more than 40 countries participated in each of the forum. After the first forum in 2013, many delegates from other countries talk to us and suggest that the forum should have more presentation on new discovery and the research program in China, because they were not only extremely curious about the new findings in China, but also keen to learn about the recent research and how new discovery in China may contribute to our understanding of the human past in general. And from the 2015, the forum studied a special session titled "The Recent Development in the Chinese Archaeology," focusing on the recent discoveries in China. The eminent archaeologists from many provinces in China were invited to present their recent work. This special session is absolutely well received and has become a very important component of the Shanghai Archaeology Forum. There's one thing I can say for sure. All the delegates just love this special session, and many have expressed their great interest in the collaboration with the Chinese colleges in the future. Indeed, some have already studied the actual collaborations because of a connection developed through the forum. I hope that I answered your question.
Professor Jing, Chinese civilization is built on cultural diversity. What role does archaeology and heritage studies play in promoting cultural exchanges around the world?
This is a very interesting. This is a fascinating subject for archaeology and heritage study. I just briefly mentioned the Shanghai Archaeology Forum, which is organized by the Chinese Academy for the Social Science and the Shanghai Municipal Government. Each forum had the primary theme. The theme for the second forum in 2015 was archaeology of the cultural contact and the cultural diversity. That is directly relevant to the question you have. The theme of the cultural diversity has been a major focus of UNESCO activity since 1990s, with a strong conviction that the respect for various forms and the expression of the human biological and the cultural diversity is fundamentally crucial to human development and the world peace. In 2015, UNESCO adopted the Convention on the protection and the promotion of the diversity of cultural expression, something like that. And it has been ratified by about 150 countries. Yeah. And today, we live in the increasingly interconnected world, one full of movement, mixture, contact, connectivity, economic exchange, and the cultural interaction. This is world of the globalization. However, globalization as a social and cultural process is not the wholly new phenomenon. Many ancient regional systems in both the old and the new world also exhibit the similar processes of globalization, although on a smaller spatial scale and lesser intensity. The mobility and the interconnection we see today are of the new magnitude and intensity, largely owing to the advent of modern technology in the transportation and the communication. The formation of a modern global social system is historically contingent upon the connectivity in antiquity. Cross the regional cultural interaction, economic exchange, political conquest lead to long-distance transfer of resources, technology, and culture, and ever-changing the cultural diversity in both the ancient and the modern world. The relationship between the past and the present makes archaeology and heritage study particularly significant today. The archaeology of the cultural contact can bring a unique and fruitful perspective to bear on the many pressing global problems we are facing today, particularly long-term processes and the consequence of a cultural contact, and urging the need for the protecting cultural diversity and heritage, tangible and intangible, for our common future. In short, cultural diversity is a timely subject that the scholar in archaeology and heritage study across the world should consider for many years to come.
Professor Jing, we appreciate your expertise and your elaborate explanations. Thank you so much for making time for us. And now for one last round of conversation with my guest today, Mr. Wong, let me start with you. It will be some time before we find out how this latest round of excavation will add to our existing knowledge about Sanxingdui. I have no doubt you'll keep a close watch on that going forward. What will you be looking forward to finding out the most?
I would say on the ground, I look forward to find new reliable evidence to solve critical questions that we as scholars have accumulated in the last decades. Because there are a lot of interests in Sanxingdui, but we have plenty of questions, but very few of them can actually be answered definitively. And as specialists, I think most of the scholars would be keen to see what kind of new evidence, the new artifacts, new findings can provide. At the same time, I would like to stress, to add especially that is the excavation of Sanxingdui at this particular time is very important. Although there are different opinions towards this question, whether we should open the new sacrificial pits, for example. Because at this special time, at our time, we seriously need to rethink the history of Chinese civilization, the history of global civilizations. And at this juncture, we need a window that is so wonderfully provided by this new excavation at Sanxingdui. And Sanxingdui itself is like a window into the Chinese past and the global past. And in this way, I would say what I expect most would be on the more abstract level, that through new research into Sanxingdui, through rethinking about Sanxingdui first, and then Chinese civilization, and then global civilizations of humanity, we may come to terms with a different understanding of history with a capital letter. And this is the most important thing we need to do for our own time. I hope this way to put it is okay.
That is a beautiful answer indeed. Dr. Fan, this excavation has drawn great public attention. We talked the other day about almost certain increase in visitor volume to the Sanxingdui Museum after this excavation. Do you agree that this has been an educational opportunity for the public as well?
Yes. Many years ago, there was an American archaeologist. He ever said that there is no such thing as private archaeology. Because archaeology is a scientific discipline for the study of history of the past, is a way to using the material evidences to piecing together the past for ourselves. So actually the curiosity of our ancestors, of our past, where we were from, is the vital thing that differs us from animals. So that's why the public showed great attentions on this times program. I think this is a great opportunity for archaeologists in China to do more interpretive works to help public to understand our work and also to help them to enhance the cultural confidence. Just as President Xi ever stressed recently that there should be more efforts to be drawn on the study of archaeology and history. And he also indicates 4 requirements for the study of archaeology, one of which is to do more interpretive works and to share the information with the public and help us to understand where we're from and to help them to enhance cultural confidence. I think that's the vital meaning or vital significance of this program. I think after this, I think the show is only 4 days. I think a lot of people still wants to know more what's in the future, what archaeologists will discover in the future. I think not only for me, myself, as one of the public archaeologists, the local government and also the Public Archaeology Committee of the Association of Chinese Archaeology have already worked on some plans to work more, to use more kinds of media, to release more information, to share the great discoveries of our past.
I am amazed by all of your time management. It's not like our archaeologists don't have enough on their plate. Certainly, that will be helpful to the public. Dr. Fan, Mr. Wong, we appreciate your company, our special coverage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that is all for our 4-day special coverage of the Sanxingdui discovery. What you've been seeing over the past few days is the largest excavation so far of the Sanxingdui cultural heritage. Many invaluable relics have been unearthed, including mysterious masks and gold wares. As experts are still tracing their links to the ancient Chinese civilization, our special coverage will pause here for now. We'll continue to monitor their archaeological efforts and will bring you the latest findings in our programs. I'm Zhong Shi in Beijing. On behalf of the entire team, thank you so much for your company.